Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dumpster Times, issue number 17, True Confessions Part 2. What's the story with the mask? And who is this person? Wanda S Duck, WSD. Will we find out? Let's watch. You're looking for Wanda Duck. This is Wanda Duck. This is the real Wanda Duck. This is the original Wanda Duck. And I'm here to tell you what exactly is underneath the mask. So here we go. First, the hat. Now finally, the mask. Yes, this mask, the original Wanda Duck. Her name was Rat Lady. She really didn't go by Wanda in the beginning, but she was a bag lady, and she used her nose and her ears to apprise her of danger, to find things that sustain her. So a little bit about this mask. It's a very old one of the very first that I made. And it's made out of something that is called Celastic. I would never make a mask out of Celastic today. It's horrible stuff. It's chemically treated fabric, which you dip into acetone, and then you wrap around a form or a sculpture. In this case, it was a clay mask. And I took pieces of Celastic. You can see inside, it's kind of rough and it's a very beat up mask. I don't know how I would manage to fix it. I just don't use it anymore. I really don't need to. This is all I need. This is the ultimate Wanda mask. It began life as one of a set of masks made for a production of Gamma Gurton's Needle for children. Half masks to help them play their characters and talk. Well, this is the mask of Gamma Gurton lead in the show. And I loved it so much, I made a copy of it for myself. And it became Wanda Duck. All right, Wanda Duck. Why Wanda Duck? Who is Wanda Duck? In the beginning, there was no Wanda Duck. But there was Super Duck throughout the notebooks of my childhood and high school. Little drawings of a clumsy duckling engaged in school activities was the beginning of my first character. I actually tried it out in real life once. I remember screaming down the hall, going, "Super Duck!" and running into Latin class and falling flat on my face, much to the delight of everyone in the classroom. But sometimes some mail would arrive at our family domicile addressed to Mrs. Duck or Mr. Duck or Wanda Duck. And so Wanda Duck became a character because Duck was funnier than Duke. And Duck took on a life of her own. Some of her friends just call her Duck. Others call her Wanda. Some call her WSD, some call her Wiz. So now you know a little bit about the person underneath the mask. Let me tell you how the character of Wanda S Duck developed. Well, I was fascinated by bag ladies. When I moved to DC, the first bag lady I encountered sort of lived on the stoop of the building where I had an illegal apartment above a porn shop. And every day when I went out, she'd be there, snuggled up in the corner with bags of things, but she never would talk. The next bag lady I met used to roam the grounds of the monuments. And she had a genuine shopping cart. It was filled with newspaper clippings. I really wanted to know what those clippings were about. Did she have the secrets to some great problem? Had she solved some kind of immense problem that nobody else had? She'd found all the evidence and kept it in her shopping cart? I thought about that bag lady for a long time, and her essence became Wanda. Wanda has a shopping cart. She fills it with props and masks and folders of information. Sometimes she hands out propaganda. The shopping cart filled with stuff was an important element in developing the character. After DC, she moved to San Francisco. When I say she, I mean Wendy, not Wanda. Wendy moved to San Francisco to study at the Leonard Pitt School of Mask and Mime. And there she learned that she was the worst in her class, but if she worked really hard, she could get better. And she did. After some unfortunate situations in San Francisco, she eventually went back to Ohio, where she's been living ever since. But she brought back her masks. She brought back the character of Wanda, and it began to evolve into a theater company called Theater of Sorts, a one-woman bag lady theater company. And Wanda began showing up in the most unexpected places, bars, in between sets of punk bands. She applied to the prestigious Cleveland Public Theater's Performance Art Festival and was accepted, and got to do her little Dumpster Doll Finds Jesus show. Well, what kind of stuff was Wanda doing? Well, a lot of it was anti-religion. In those days, the 80s and the 90s were full of people using their religion, trying to control women's bodies, people's attitudes, through laws and courts. It was horrible. And so I protested through performance. All right, so have you been following along? Yes. Okay, so Wanda went to California, then she went back to Ohio, brought back new ways of working, and started doing her form of theater. She received one review for her work, and it is the only review she ever needed. It's the most beautiful review, and I'm going to read it for you because the description of what was going on in her performance, he captures it to a T. I could never describe myself as well as he did. The bartender and the bag lady both worked the crowd, but never together. The calendar said April, but outside of February, wind blew razor blades into the faces of the patrons who ducked into the Bauhaus in downtown Akron in search of heat. The guy in the motorcycle jacket held the door open a bit too long on his entrance, and this irritated the Bolshevik poet, stirred out of his contemplation of social injustice by the cold wind that snapped at his ankles. But the door did close and the place filled up, and by about 11 p.m. on that dark night last week, the crowd had mellowed. Wendy Duke served drinks, and down at the end of the room, Jojo Brigandi's drumsticks hissed in time with the keyboard work of Joe Scott, while Wilbur Krebs' left hand danced and his right hand strummed, and his moody guitar now and then seemed to break out laughing. The band is known as Third Plane, and the musicians filled that little bar with a melodic jazz that floated on the newness of its creation, but clearly was anchored in the past, anchored in just such smoke-filled saloons where jazz was born. When Third Plane took a break, however, their space was claimed by the bag lady. She didn't seem so much to walk into the joint as float in a pile of ragged clothes upon a stick. The bag lady had some things to say, and the patrons at the bar were going to listen. She told about her love life. She told about how life is a delivery service that always arrives too late. Now and then, she wandered among the patrons to make her point. Several times, she reached into her bag and pulled out a mask just to underline her point. When the masks finally were all off and the bag lady had left, the bartender came back. The fact is that Wendy S Duck, the bartender, is the bag lady. Her tirades at the patrons and her soft poetic soliloquies are what some might call performance art. But Duke isn't much for labels. I call it theater of sorts, she said and shrugged. A 1969 graduate of Highland School in Medina County, Duke 37, graduated from the University of Akron in 73 with a degree in theater. Her experiences since then, though, seem more like those of actors a century ago, or even longer, than the experience of modern actors. She and two other women ran a storefront theater in Washington, D.C. I did tech work, swept the floor, you name it. Some people called it a women's theater. But I'm not a feminist, I'm a humanist. Duke spent some time in California where she studied acting. She also is a painter, a poet, and a sculptor, and she worked on those things too. She came back to Northeast Ohio about 10 years ago. Her parents still live here. My parents have been my biggest influence, she said. They were reading Shakespeare to me when I was real young. I remember the first play I saw. I thought it was a magical thing. Her own bent, though, clearly is non-traditional. Well, it is non-traditional if looked at through the normal prism of middle-class theater. The sort of theater polite people attend on weekends and then discuss in interesting chats. Duke's work harkens to an older tradition, to medieval times when theater was performed in the street, and when the actors and the audience mingled, and when the topics often were outrageous. In her theatrically checkered career, Duke seems always to be testing the parameters of a theater. Once she was part of a group called The Next Stage. It performed in Cuyahoga Falls. We did a production of Ben Jonson's The Alchemist. It didn't cost us anything. The stage was made of trash. That was literally true, for the play was set in a time after a great war and the world was in ruins. Another time, she staged a mass improvisational theater experience at the Akron Civic Theater. The Bauhaus is an ideal place for Duke to work. The red Bauhaus sign seems almost secretive, for the bar is the only place open at night on South Main Street between Exchange and Cedar Streets. The patrons range from spike-haired punks to gentle souls in walking shoes who read poetry and sip beer. If anything, the Bauhaus reminds one of the coffee houses of the 50s, or a New York bar that is just around the corner from the Bowery and just up the street from Inspiration. Duke's act last week is an ongoing one. Her bag lady is more than a character, she said. It's me, 20 years from now, she explained. I reach into the bag and sometimes I'm surprised at what comes out. Her bag lady is sometimes aggressive, sometimes seductive, but always very human. Duke is a good actress, and the measure of that is you cannot catch her acting. Her bag lady is just there going on about this and that, and you sort of want to buy her a drink. Duke and others who do what she does are convinced that the energy of live theater is too often dissipated in the formal, almost church-like settings of many stages. Hers is a theater of risk. She calls it theater of sorts, she said, because it happens whenever and wherever I feel like it. So my God, that was a great review. And after reading that, I said, I don't need any more reviews. I made dozens of copies of it. I've got a box full of dozens of copies of it. And it just made me, it validated what I was doing. I thought I knew what I was doing, but, well. So Wanda has many hats. This is her collection of pins. Coffee is my drug. Third playing the band, yes. Good one when I'm feeling more gender fluid. This is a good one. Also like this one. It's kind of Elizabethan too. All right. So anyway, that was a fantastic review. And when I read that, my head got so big, I knew I could never get any more reviews because this was enough. This accurately stated what I was doing, described the act, and he got it. So I made dozens of copies of that review and used it, mailed it around and got gigs. And my goal always was not to be famous, but was to show up, do or say something outrageous, get people to listen. I mean, some of the topics I was doing, religion, who needs it, government, who needs it, and what I would do is I would come in with my shopping cart, announce the topic, get some volunteers from the audience to come up and put on a mask and answer the question in character. And it was a lot easier for people to participate when they were wearing a mask. Masks give you courage because it's some other character. You don't have to worry about you. You don't have to worry about your face on camera. So they're very comforting once you can convince someone to put them on. Once you can convince someone to put it on, they get into it. Shows, let's see, I went on tour. I performed in Michigan. I performed in Illinois, Chicago. I went on this fantastic tour that I created where I jumped on the train with my shopping cart and my props and left Akron and went to Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New York. Performing always at little tiny anarchist trending venues. Here's a flyer for the Brave New World Order tour, showing the places I was stopping. Albany. I also performed in Cooperstown, thanks to a friend up there at an art gallery. And I always was nice, but saying outrageous things about things like kinky sex, violence, law and order, death and destruction, giving the people what they want. This character was meant to be me when I was old. And I envisioned a world where I would be too poor to have my own place. So I'd be living in a dumpster. People were trying to constantly squash freedom of speech. So I would be in my little dumpster, typing up the latest issue of the Dumpster Times, going on about peace and freedom and justice and all of the things, racial equality, anti-violence. You couldn't stop Wanda. You still can't stop Wanda. She did go into semi-retirement, though. She did. When Wanda S Duck finally took a professional position and worked within the system, Wanda was resigned to the shopping cart. A couple of times she reappeared, like when I was taking a college class. I performed about the Common Core, I think. Now, this mask is not made out of celastic. It was originally a clay sculpture, and I soaked strips of newspaper in water, softening them up. And then I used acrylic modeling paste watered down to a creamy goo-like substance. And I would laminate those strips on the mask. And that was my ultimate mask making technique. This is made out of paper, about 5 layers. It's breathable, it's comfortable. It is cracking up. It does need a little repair. The eye holes are a little bit small, so I might want to work on the eye holes. But Wanda came back out. When I retired, Wanda was there waiting for me at home. And she whispered in my ear, "Why don't you become a YouTuber? Wanda can do all the talking. You won't have to do anything. You can just put on Wanda, pick a topic, and go." And that's what's happened. Do I feel motivated to perform without this mask? No. And I got to tell you, if you feel uncomfortable watching me performing in a mask, Think about everybody else you enjoy on YouTube. They're all playing characters too. Mine is just super obvious. But when people turn on the record button or the live stream button, they change. They become aware of their audience and they are playing the character that they want the audience to connect with. So I'm going to continue doing my show in mask because Wanda gives me the freedom to say whatever the fuck I feel like saying. And if somebody gets mad, I'll just say, that was Wanda. Thanks for watching. Happy Halloween. And I'll see you next time. Bye.